what specific financial services use cases do you see moving from experimentational to product grade in the next year or so? And what's still missing to see adoption at scale?
Great question. The areas we see the most progress and we confidently think will be very much in a production environment running large workflows for these large financial service firms is today there's the mid and back office operations. What I like to say is candidly the less risky, but still very impactful. So if you give you an example, instead of deploying a customer service agent that reaches, 20 million customers front facing, powered entirely by AI, where if it makes a mistake, there's real ramifications. A lot of the production workloads and use cases we see going to really be deployed heavily are these like mid back office where there's still much more of the human in the loop component. So I'll give you an example, like KYC, know your customer, is a very big pain point for banks and involves a lot of data extraction and validating and verifying that Chris, for instance, is who he says he is. Now, today, that is a very, very good use case for generative AI and models like ours. And you still have the added benefit of, while it can do 80, 90% of the heavy lift, the humans are still very much in the loop to make sure that the checks and balances are in place. Other mid back office operations is everything from research and the research divisions at a bank. These will be, workflows will be very, very, very automated. So the individual who is historically tasked with conducting equity research or in investment research at a hedge fund, they get to really focus on the insights that are gleaned and think of how they want to leverage those versus having to read 410Ks. These are the types of use cases that are becoming very production grade and like being fully deployed now. And we expect to see this come out in far higher frequency and far greater impact in 2026.
With the research you mentioned, isn't there a risk still for hallucinations that the AI is consuming a bunch of reports and they tell their researcher, this is what I found, and the researcher is like, okay, face value, this makes sense. How do they know what to double check? Double check everything? Then what have you achieved? Like
it's a very good point. It's actually one of the biggest, I don't want to use the word bottleneck, but challenges is what you just touched on. So today, let's role play a use case. I give you a research report. And to your point, if I have to double check every number, it almost defeats the purpose. So things we do today are we'll generate the research report and we'll cite every source, for instance. Still then I have to go back to the sources. If I'm Chris, I got to go back to see, okay, you give me a source I click through. That's like a direct link to a 10K or through our data connector that might open up my Snowflake instance and I see where you pulled that number from. But that's still work, right? So what we do at this stage is, as the models progress, we still have the human go through that laborious process, right? Well, it generates the report, they're going to check the data sources. And what we do when we run evals, like evaluation frameworks, is a year ago when they checked those sources, there might be 2 out of 10 facts that were wrong, right? Good thing they checked. Now, when these workloads are running, when they're properly set up, you're getting like 99 out of 100 right. So what's happened is our belief is eventually the same way you would almost check, like, Chris would check a source when he's reading an article and not maybe like blindly trust it, but eventually their credibility gets so good that you might stop checking all those sources because I trust Forbes. It's just I trust they're doing their work. And that's where we see it going in 2026, because if you can imagine, one of the best examples I've heard is in the driverless car industry. If you and I heard a driverless car got in an accident as often as a human, we wouldn't probably get in it. If we heard it got in an accident even half as often as a human, we'd still be a bit uneasy. I'm like, there's no one there. It's when, you and I publish research that shows, hey, this car is 20 times less likely to get into an accident. Eventually you hit this tipping point where you're like, okay, I feel comfortable getting to the car. And I think that tipping point will, with AI, is coming in 2026, where these evals are so thorough that, 1,000 times it's accurate. Then the question becomes, not only is it as accurate as the human who's currently doing that research. It's more accurate than them, because one of the common misconceptions is humans are not fallible, right? The human might put the wrong number or the digit in a research report.
So I guess quite a few banks are excited about the prospect of working with you and others, but I suppose it's a two-way street here. I guess you also need to screen and evaluate whether this particular bank or fintech is ready to build agentic workflows or use your embedded intelligence or building AI financial products. How do you think about who is ready and not?
It's a great question, and it's a wonderful problem to have as a firm such as ours, where you have the luxury of kind of like vetting your customers, because when you're growing as fast as we are, you don't have the luxury of just taking on everyone for the reasons you mentioned. So we will very thoughtfully assess effectively their AI readiness, right? And there's a lot of great benchmarks out there, like Evident AI, that helps support, like almost directionally, how ready are they to ingest and leverage this technology. And we have our own methodologies. It's everything from what percentage of your data and workloads are already in the cloud versus on-prem, right? So making sure you have like the infrastructure for us to actually do the work. It's, your willingness to partner. What that means is not, hey, we just have a conversation with the chief AI officer and he's like, let's do this. We need to meet with the business teams, the individuals, the person at their desk who's actually doing the day-to-day work, to get a sense of what needs to be true to transform the way they operate. And without an organization opening up that level of engagement, we kind of proactively say, hey, look, that is what's required to close the gap between something that's helping you write a better email, right? Or something that's like extracting a single insight to like transforming the way people work. So we kind of go through that rubric with potential customers, just to make sure we don't want to waste their time either. We might just say, hey, you're just not almost ready to ingest the technology we have. We're happy to work with you on that. But some will go much deeper than others because they're already ready to rock, so to speak.
And you mentioned in the beginning some good use cases that you're already working on, but where do you see the biggest untapped opportunities between banks and leveraging smart AI?
I still think, as much as I'm extremely excited about the use cases we mentioned, I think the untap is, or I should say like the untapped potential, it's really more customer facing stuff, because you can imagine the reluctance to start, for the reasons I alluded to earlier. It's, let's say we're running a wealth management business, you're managing my client and you're managing my money. You really want to be thoughtful of how you're navigating the relationship, communicating, surfacing ideas for this individual. That is still, I think, much farther away from letting AI just run point on that. So when I think about untapped potential, really the customer facing applications, I still think we're like scratching the surface on. Because in the regulated industry that we work in, banks, insurance companies, I mean, this would be true if you were buying a pair of shoes and you had a bad experience that was powered by AI. But you can imagine if you and I are, applying for a mortgage, and my experience with like virtual mortgage broker just kind of like steers wrong, that the implications are huge. So that's where I'm most excited, and where I think the potential will be truly like transformational.
Building on that, so it's one thing, I guess, what you're working on, but what are you getting requests for from clients, from your bank partners? What do they want from you going forward?
It's funny. Right now, it's the unsexy stuff. The number 1, 2, and 3 requests we get: modernize my legacy code bases. Things that, you don't even think about, but it turns out these institutions are built on 40, 30-year-old legacy code that honestly people no longer know how to even write. So they're running out of people who can maintain this stuff. So it turns out Claude Code is very good at modernizing legacy code. Fraud. 90% of the executives I talk to in banking are like, JP, fraud is a nightmare for us. It gets more and more expensive and more complicated. How can you support us there? You think that some of the things I talked about, the KYC, financial controls, reconciling finances, the know your customer, the equity research, these are unquestionably the most tested areas to start on. And once you start going like the insurance world, similarly, it's underwriting and claims. It's, hey, this is very data intensive. It's very laborious. We know large language models will be well suited here. Can you? Those are the types of things that are top of mind.
And looking ahead, then, I mean, we're kind of skirting around the fringes here, but on this subject. But what do you see? What's the future like for Anthropic going forward? And what's your role in your relation with the financial services businesses you work with? Is it just providing the models, or is it to do more complicated things like orchestration or something?
Yeah, it's a great question. Increasingly, our focus providing the models is almost step one. Our focus is more, and I just heard a colleague of mine say this, and I loved it. It was help them go from wow to how. So it's everything from, hey, our models are really good at these things, to working with your teams to set up our models in your existing workflows to do these things, to making sure these things are done safely and responsibly, to helping you run an eval to make sure, hey, when is it okay to let this thing kind of run without human intervention? To deploying it. And now when Chris talks to a mortgage broker, Claude's powering an experience. So we will work across that entire journey, from helping them build applications to advising them how to best prompt Claude to get the out of it.
Jonathan, super interesting insight. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it.